They fired me on a Thursday. No warning, no performance review, no final conversation. Just a sterile HR meeting and a security escort to the parking lot. After 8 years of giving everything to that company, I walked away with 3 weeks severance and a gnawing feeling in my gut that something wasn't right. Have you ever been in a situation where you were unfairly let go or targeted at work, only to discover later that there was more going on behind the scenes? How did you handle it, and what did you learn from the experience? Drop a comment and let me know what time it is where you are and where you're watching from. I see every one of you. My name's Ethan Cole. I'm 33, born and raised in Michigan, though I've spent the last decade hopping between major cities chasing my career. I'm not flashy, not loud, just one of those steady guys who comes in early, double-checks everything, and fixes messes quietly before anyone up the chain knows there was a problem. I'd worked my way into a lead systems analyst role, managing a mid-sized team of developers and infrastructure people. I wasn't climbing the ladder fast, but I had stability, a decent paycheck, and some level of respect from my peers. Or so I thought. The man who fired me, Darren Miles, had only been with the company a year and a half. Tall, always polished, fake-friendly, he had that MBA shine and loved talking about agile transformations and disrupting inefficiencies, which usually just meant overworking his staff and trimming heads when budgets got tight. He wasn't my boss when I joined. My original supervisor, Lisa, was fair and transparent. But Darren took over her role after she transferred to corporate, and things changed fast. He started slowly, reassigning my team's more visible projects to his favorites, adding me to fewer strategic meetings, cutting me out of client calls I used to lead. It was subtle, the kind of erosion you don't notice at first because you're too busy trying to keep everything afloat. Then, on that Thursday morning, he asked me to come into his office. Just like that. No heads up. "Ethan," he said, standing behind his modern glass desk, arms folded like he was giving a TED Talk. "We're going through some restructuring. Your position's been eliminated, effective today." I actually laughed. That nervous, confused kind of laugh you can't help. "Wait. What? Restructuring? I just wrapped the Trentwell deployment under budget and ahead of schedule." "This isn't about performance, it's a strategic shift. HR has your exit documents." He didn't sit, didn't offer a seat either. I wasn't even allowed to grab my things from my desk. "We'll mail them," they said, like I was a terminated contractor, not someone who'd spent the last 8 years helping build the backbone of their systems. I walked out through the lobby carrying nothing but a manila envelope. Security watched like I might go rogue. I'd never been written up, never missed a deadline. My ID badge didn't even beep on the way out. It had already been deactivated. That night, as I sat at my kitchen table staring into a flat beer, I got an email from Rachel, former project coordinator, quiet but observant. She left last month. No explanation. Her subject line stopped me cold. "About Darren. I think you should see this. He thought he buried me, but he forgot who I am and what I know." Rachel's email wasn't long, but it hit like a brick. She'd attached a folder of PDFs, screenshots, and meeting notes, things I recognized but with names and details I hadn't seen before. At the top of the message, she wrote, "I didn't know who else to trust. You need to see what he's been doing." I spent the next 2 hours hunched over my laptop, scrolling through the files. At first, it was a mess of contract documents, payment records, and internal memos, stuff that looked routine unless you knew what to look for. And I did. Darren had been manipulating project budgets, not just inflating time reports, but diverting funds, routing payments through consulting vendors that didn't actually exist, fake invoices, padded expenses, signatures that looked just a little too perfect. It was sloppy in some places, almost like he assumed no one would ever look twice. But it had worked. He kept under the audit thresholds, spread it across enough projects, and made sure the paper trail circled back clean. The only reason Rachel caught it was because she'd been helping with quarterly reconciliation when she noticed duplicate invoice numbers tied to a Summit Collaborative, a firm no one in procurement had ever met. When she brought it up to Darren, he brushed it off. 2 weeks later, she was offered a lateral move out of the department. She resigned instead. I stared at the screen, jaw clenched. It all made sense now. Why Darren iced me out. Why my budgets were getting mysteriously adjusted after submission. I'd flagged some discrepancies last quarter, just routine questions. But apparently, even asking had put me in the line of fire. Darren didn't just eliminate me to restructure. He needed me gone before I connected the rest of the dots. That realization left a sour taste in my mouth. I'd seen workplace politics before, sure, but this wasn't petty. This was fraud, criminal, and suddenly I was no longer just a guy who lost his job. I was a liability to Darren, a risk, and he acted fast to cut that risk off at the knees. I called Rachel. She picked up on the first ring. "I was hoping you'd call," she said. Her voice was steady but tired. "I kept copies of everything. If he figures that out, I don't know what he'll do." "You did the right thing," I told her. "This is big, bigger than I thought." "There's more," she said quietly. "You're not the only one he's targeted. I've been talking to Amanda. She left in March. He threatened her with a performance review when she brought up missing subcontractor reports. That flipped a switch in me. Quiet people were getting pushed out, while Darren and his golden circle kept climbing. I'd spent years believing if you worked hard and stayed honest, you'd be safe. I knew now that wasn't true. But Darren had made one mistake. He underestimated me. The next morning, I was in full gear. Sleep hadn't come easy. My brain wouldn't shut off. But I woke up with a kind of clarity I hadn't felt in weeks. I wasn't going to let Darren get away with this, and I sure as hell wasn't going to stay silent. Not after what I saw. First thing, I called an old friend, Connor. We'd worked together years back at a smaller firm before he went into government contracting. These days, he was a compliance officer with the Office of Federal Procurement Policy, the kind of guy who knew how to read between the lines. I trusted him. I didn't lead with everything, just told him I had documents showing possible contractor fraud tied to federal funds, and asked what my options were. He was quiet for a beat. Then, "If this touches federal money, Ethan, it's serious. Send me what you have. Do not, under any circumstances, try to contact him or the company again directly. Let us handle it from here." I gathered everything Rachel had sent, cross-referenced it with what I had saved in my personal drive, and scrubbed every bit of it for metadata before sharing. I wasn't stupid. If Darren caught wind of what was coming, he'd try to spin it as a misunderstanding, maybe even blame me. I'd seen guys like him do it before, talk their way out of anything with a smile and a golf course contact list. That afternoon, Rachel looped me in with Amanda, the other woman who'd left earlier this year. We jumped on a call, and I listened as she laid out her story. It was all the same pattern, noticing inconsistencies, raising questions, and then being pressured out. Same playbook, same guy. Only difference was, Amanda had forwarded a few email threads to her personal inbox when she left, including one where Darren directly instructed her to delay invoice uploads until we finalize external adjustments. Corporate speak, but damning if you knew what it meant. By the end of that call, I had what I needed: a pattern of retaliation, misappropriation of funds, and at least 3 ex-employees willing to speak up. Connor texted me the name of a contact at the Office of Inspector General and said they were opening a preliminary inquiry. Things were moving fast now. But I wasn't finished yet. I still had access to a few backdoor systems. Nothing unethical, just standard admin logins that hadn't been revoked yet because Darren's team was sloppy with offboarding. I used it to check one thing: Darren's internal calendar. He had a lunch scheduled the next day with one of the firm's largest federal clients, a client I had worked with for 2 years. I made a quiet call, not to start a war, but to plant a seed. "Just thought you might want to be aware," I said carefully, "that the guy you're meeting with tomorrow might be under active investigation. I can't say more yet, but you'll want your people looking at Summit Collaborative's billing history." There was a pause on the other end, then a cold, professional, "We'll look into it." "Thank you, Ethan." The first domino was wobbling. By the end of that week, I could feel something shifting, not just in my gut, but in the way people started reaching out, quietly, cautiously. First, it was Jared from the finance team, someone I hadn't spoken to since a holiday party 2 years ago. He messaged me on LinkedIn with a vague, "Hey, got a minute to talk about some weird stuff I'm seeing?" Then came Tasha, one of the junior analysts I mentored. She'd always kept her head down, focused on her tasks, never one to get involved in drama. But now she was emailing me from her personal account, asking if I'd noticed anything off with vendor approvals last quarter. The ripples were spreading. Darren's grip was slipping. I didn't gloat. I didn't post anything vague or bitter online. That's not how this kind of thing works. In corporate America, revenge isn't loud. It's patient. It's watching the man who made your life hell realize the ground under him is cracking and not being able to do a damn thing to stop it. Connor called me Friday afternoon. "We've got enough to formally open an investigation," he said. "They're pulling his internal communications now. If the company's smart, they'll cooperate. If not, well, they'll regret it." I asked him how long something like this usually took. "Could be weeks, could be months. But it's in motion now. And Ethan, don't go looking for a front row seat. Stay clean. Let this play out." It wasn't easy. Every part of me wanted to see Darren squirm. I imagined him showing up to that lunch meeting with the federal client, only to be met with tight smiles and stiffer questions. I pictured him backpedaling, sweating through his tailored suit as he realized the story wasn't adding up. The house of cards he'd built wasn't just falling. It was collapsing in on him. What struck me most, though, was how many people came forward once they sensed it was safe. That was the part I hadn't expected. Jared sent over 3 internal memos showing retroactive budget approvals with Darren's name on the sign-off line. Tasha found a spreadsheet with 2 separate tabs, one for actual expenses, one for Darren's version, as she put it. It wasn't just fraud. It was coordinated. And everyone had been too afraid to speak up until now. I documented everything, every conversation, every file, every forwarded message. I created a secure drive and locked it behind encryption. If Darren somehow tried to flip the narrative, say, paint me as a disgruntled ex-employee, I needed to be ready. Meanwhile, I started seeing whispers online, industry message boards, anonymous tips on Glassdoor, even a few vague tweets from people I didn't recognize, but clearly worked at the same company. The storm was coming. But here's the thing about storms. They're loud, messy, and always leave something exposed. Darren had kicked me out thinking he'd buried the threat. Instead, he'd turned me into the fuse. 2 weeks later, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something told me to pick up. "Ethan Cole?" the voice asked, calm but clipped. "This is Agent Keller. I'm with the Office of the Inspector General. I'd like to ask you a few questions, if you're available." My heart picked up a beat, but I kept my tone level. "Of course, I've been expecting this." We spoke for nearly an hour. He was thorough, methodical. He asked about timelines, documents, access levels, what I knew, what I suspected, and how I came to know it. I laid it all out. He didn't confirm much, but I could tell from his follow-ups that he already had a good portion of the puzzle. He was just making sure I fit into it cleanly. And I did. When we hung up, I sat back in my chair, exhaling slowly. That call wasn't closure, not yet. But it was confirmation. I wasn't imagining any of this. And more importantly, someone with real authority was digging in. That same afternoon, Rachel texted me, "Darren's been out all day. Word is he got called into a meeting with legal and hasn't come back." I didn't smile. I didn't cheer. But I did close my laptop with a kind of peace I hadn't felt in weeks. Over the next few days, the trickle became a flood. More employees messaged me, some current, some recently gone. They shared emails, Slack messages, billing inconsistencies. One even admitted Darren had tried to bribe them with a bonus for pushing through an altered invoice. The story was out, and no matter how hard Darren tried to contain it, it was too late. Then came the company-wide memo, a bland, HR-crafted statement about pending internal reviews and temporary leadership changes. It didn't name names, but it didn't have to. By then, everyone knew. Darren was taking personal time, which in corporate speak meant he was either lawyering up or getting pushed out. Probably both. A few folks asked if I was going to sue. I thought about it, sure, but lawsuits are public, messy, and honestly, I didn't need more chaos. What I wanted was simple: truth and accountability. I'd already spoken to the investigators. I'd done my part. Now it was time to step back and let the system work, flawed as it sometimes is. I started sleeping again. Not well, not all the time. But the knots in my stomach had loosened. The bitterness was still there, sure, but now it was tempered with something else. Pride. Not the kind you shout about, but the kind that sits in your chest and says, "You didn't let this break you." Darren had underestimated me from the start. He saw me as a quiet cog in the machine, easily replaced, easily silenced. But he forgot. Quiet doesn't mean weak. And some people, when backed into a corner, don't just push back. They bring the whole damn wall down. A month after Darren vanished from the org chart, I got an email from the compliance office. No subject line, just a short message. "The investigation is concluding. We appreciate your cooperation. Internal action has been taken, and referrals have been made externally where appropriate. You may be contacted as a witness." That was it. No drama, no parade. But I knew what it meant. Darren was done. Whether he got fired outright or resigned quietly, the important part was that he no longer held power over anyone. The fake vendors? Shut down. The financial trails? Audited. The retaliation? Documented. The fallout would take time to ripple through, but the damage was already done. Just not to me. I never got a formal apology from the company. I didn't expect one. In the end, they protected themselves, not me. That's how big business works. But word got around. People knew what happened. And something funny started to happen after that. Recruiters began reaching out. At first, I ignored them. I was still decompressing, still rebuilding my headspace. But then I got a message from a small consultancy run by former whistleblowers, folks who'd been through the same fire and come out the other side sharper. They said they wanted someone who knew what quiet integrity looked like, someone who knew how to spot rot before it spread. I took the meeting. The job came with less prestige, less polish, but it came with people I respected, people who believed in doing the work right, even when no one's watching. That mattered more to me now than any title ever did. On my first day, I walked into a modest office with worn hardwood floors and no glass walls, no Darren types in sight, just real people. I shook hands with my new team, grabbed a coffee, and sat down at my desk. An actual desk I could call mine. As I booted up the system, a thought crossed my mind. Darren might still think he won. He might still be telling his version of the story at bars or to interviewers, trying to scrub the stain off his resume. But I don't need to correct him. Because I've already moved on, and he's still running. This wasn't just revenge. It wasn't about burning down his career or seeing him humiliated. It was about making sure people like Rachel and Amanda, and the dozens of others who never had a voice, weren't erased. And maybe, just maybe, it was about proving something to myself. That keeping your head down doesn't mean letting people walk over you. That staying quiet doesn't mean staying weak. And that sometimes, when they fire you to keep you quiet, you become the loudest thing they never saw coming.